Hey everyone, it's Brian Balfour. Welcome to the Reforge Growth Series. We're super excited to have you here. And in this first module, what we want to do is set the foundation and context for the next 8 modules. We're going to be laying the content on you. And so what we want to go through is not only program outcomes and what you can expect on a week-to-week basis here, but also kind of set the context around the foundation of the concepts that we're going to be talking through. To kick things off, we kind of need to rewind a little bit, go back a little bit in time to 2007. In 2007, Facebook is at 50 million monthly active users, and they're growing at a rate to hit about 300 million monthly active users by 2012. This guy, Chamath Palihapitiya, was the first head of growth at Facebook. And when Sheryl Sandberg started as COO, they had a conversation that Chamath recalls in a Recode Decode podcast. They sat down and Sheryl said, "Well, Chamath, what do you want to focus on?" And Chamath said, "I'm going to focus on changing the product, doing some SEO, some SEM, applying some algorithms, etc." And Sheryl said, "Great, what do you call that?" And Chamath just responded, "I don't know. I call that growth. We're going to try and grow, and I'm going to be the head of growing stuff." And as a result of this conversation, the first official growth team was born. Now, the impact of this team is absolutely undeniable. Rather than hitting 300 million monthly active users by 2012, they ended up hitting 1 billion. And while this isn't due to all of the growth team played a major part in the success of Facebook having growth at such a fast pace. And as a result, almost every other top company in Silicon Valley established their own growth teams, from LinkedIn to Pinterest to Uber, SurveyMonkey, Atlassian, Airbnb, Slack, even Tesla. As growth teams spread across the top companies in Valley and the technology, a lot of different questions started to emerge. Like, what is the difference between marketing and growth marketing? And what is the difference between product and growth? Where does a growth team live in the org? And then all of a sudden, all these negative biases started to emerge. Things like growth just messes up the product, or growth is just a bunch of hacks. Growth is just tricks users into spam, and growth just focuses on small, meaningless optimizations. We have questions around team, like what is the right structure for a growth team, or things like good engineers don't want to work on growth. But before we get into this mess of questions and uninformed biases, the thing that we all need to recognize is that those top teams, those top companies, all recognized and embraced 3 critical points. Growth wins, the game has changed, and we need a different approach. And this is best represented by a quote from Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1, where he said, "Poor distribution, not product, is the #1 cause of failure." So why is that? Well, we need to dig into history once again. If we go back to the early 90s, for you to succeed, all you really needed was great tech. The ecosystem was new, it wasn't crowded, it was easy to stand out, and technology risk was the primary risk. The main question people asked was, can this thing be built? But as we moved into the post-2001 era, the mid-2000s, Web 2.0, we shifted from, can this thing be built, to also, is this a great product? You needed both to have success. Technology risk was decreasing, and as this happened, what we have started to see is that distribution risk has increased. It no longer is about, can this thing be built, or can a great product be built here? But it's much more about, if it gets built, can it get noticed? And so we now live in this age where it's not just great tech, not just great product, but we also need great distribution in order to be successful. But for some reason, we seem to be kind of stuck one step behind. If you go to any sort of conference or see any sort of speaker and somebody asks a really insightful question around growth and how to grow, you almost always inevitably get this answer. You just need to build a great product. But the problem with this answer is it's incomplete at best and pretty much wrong. There are terrible products that have grown to be billion-dollar-plus companies and great products that haven't grown at all. We can think about the expense reporting software Concur. You don't have to go too far on Twitter to find users complaining about Concur as a terrible product. And they have a pretty good reason to complain about it. The product was forced on me as a user during my time at HubSpot, and it took forever, very complicated, to do the simplest core task of filing an expense report. Yet, At the time of this recording, Concur as a company has a $7.5 billion market cap. Concur has grown to this incredible feat and to a level that very few ever get to. Yet by most people's definition, a great product was not part of the reason for this growth and for this success. So what we need to really dig into are the reasons of why does growth win? Why is it this thing that has become the dominant factor in success? Well, there's 4 reasons why growth wins: defensibility, resources, learnings, and growth producing more growth. Let's dive into them individually. Let's start with defensibility. The key about defensibility is that the more distribution you have, you can leverage it into other products to drive even more distribution. We don't need to go too far in recent history to see when Snap developed their feature of stories, it was quickly copied by Facebook, Instagram, as well as WhatsApp. As Facebook copied Snap, Snapchat growth flattened to even their most recent announcement that their growth has started to decline, while Instagram growth has been accelerating. And this isn't just in the B2C space either. We can see this in B2B software. HubSpot started by building a great dominant entrenchment in the space of marketing automation software. They built that audience among mid-market B2B companies. Since establishing that dominance, they've started to leverage their audience into other very competitive software verticals. First into the CRM space, then into the sales acceleration space, and just recently into the customer support space. They've leveraged that core audience into new products to drive even more growth and more embedding and more defensibility. So the question here is why? Why is growth defensible? Well, Ben Thompson from the popular publication Stratechery kind of said it best. Habit and user expectation remains a stronger moat than most appreciate it. From the user perspective, habits are incredibly hard to break. The switching costs once a habit has been established is constantly underestimated by people, and if you own that habit, you own that growth, you can leverage it into more defensible actions. Let's dive into the second reason of why growth wins. Let's talk a little bit about how growth attracts resources, which produces more growth. If we looked at the talent market is getting increasingly competitive with no end in sight. With more and more software startups to choose from, compensation aside, the best talent typically wants a few things. One is that they want validation that it's working, they want opportunity for personal professional growth, and they want to work with other talented people. All of these stem from a product and company that is growing. Growth is the best validation for all of these things. And so as you grow, you're able to attract more of the top talent, and applied correctly leads to more growth. A very similar dynamic happens with another type of resource, which is capital. One of the biggest determining factors in raising capital is growth. So as you grow more, you're able to attract more capital, and applying that capital in the appropriate way cause more growth. And this happens not just at the company and the product level, but at the individual level as well internally within the org. Projects that are seen as growing or have a direct impact on growth have capital, attention, and people flow to them. So if you want to position yourself well internally, it's always a question of finding a way to work on a project that is exhibiting the most growth. The third reason for why growth wins is learning. Growth produces quicker and deeper learnings, which produces more growth. When thinking about learning, there are 3 areas that we really want to learn about. The first is our users. So what motivates our users? Where do they spend their time? How do they explain the problem we're solving? What are their fears? The second is the product. How do users get in and out of the product? How do they change user states? The third, channels. How do our channels work? How does Facebook's feed algorithm work? How does Google decide which content to rank, as well as a number of other factors? The faster we learn about these things, the more we're able to manipulate the levers that actually cause more growth. So the more that we know about these 3 things, we're able to get higher hit rates, a higher batting average on our experiments. We're also able to recognize things that have changed in the ecosystem faster and capitalize on new opportunities. Growth equals learnings equals more growth is simply represented as a loop. As we grow, we get more data and users. And as we get more data and users, it leads to quicker, faster, and deeper experiment results. We can run more experiments and get quicker feedback the more data and users we have. And as we are able to run more of those experiments, we get more learnings. And as we apply those learnings about our product, about our channels, and about our users, we're able to implement and cause more growth. And so learnings compound just like growth, which leads us to the fourth point. More growth leads to more growth. One of the concepts that we're going to be talking a lot about within this program is how the common thought process and framework of using funnels to think through growth is exactly wrong. If you look at the best and fastest growing companies, they're actually built not on funnels, but a system of compounding loops where you're able to generate an output that is reinvested back into an input to cause more output. As we go deeper into this insight, the one thing you need to know now is that the returns you get from these compounding loops are typically a function of the existing user base. So just like in finance, where you earn more interest dollars, the larger the base principal is, the more interest, the more users, the more growth that is going to become, more compound interest you're going to get, the larger the base of users. So growth equals more growth. So we've been through the 4 reasons of why growth wins: defensibility, resources, learnings, and growth equals compounding growth. But the game has changed around growth and how we approach it. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next lesson.